3.
Hi, here I am doing my first video show for the win. I am so excited about this. I've not done anything like this really before. And I have to say, my wonderful husband Bob is the one that set this up for me, and he's going to teach me how to keep doing this so I can do it my very own self. We are just so high tech. I can hardly stand it. So thank you, darling Bob, for doing this for me today. So, I have a story for you. It's an old story called Old Joe and the Carpenter. It's a story from the United States, and it's been told by many storytellers because it's such a great story. At least that's how I think of it. Here's how it goes. Once upon a time, there was an old fellow called Old Joe. He lived out in the country in a farm. And the farm next door to him, well, in that farm lived his best friend, another old fella. And these guys, well, they had raised their families there. They had been in love there. They sent their children off to the big city there. And both their wives died. And so Old Joe and his friend, why, they spent a lot of time together. They would have breakfast together sometimes. They would have dinner together often. They sat on their front porches and chatted. They kept each other company. They wondered why their kids didn't come home to the farm that much. I guess lots of us wonder that kind of thing if we're of that age. And they were the best of friends. Never had an argument. Till this one day, on this day, a calf came down from the upper pasture. And Joe's neighbor said, "I think that's my calf. It's on my property." Joe said, No. It has the same markings as my best cow. That's my calf." And his friend said, No, that's my calf. It's on my property. And do you know, over this calf, they had an enormous argument. These two men who hadn't argued forever had an enormous argument. If the truth were told, they were both a bit stubborn, and neither one would give in. And here's what happened. The next day, they didn't talk to each other. They didn't have breakfast together. They didn't have dinner together. They didn't sit on the front porch. And the day after that, and the day after that. In fact, they would each come out on their front porches and make sure they didn't look toward the other front porch. For Joe, really, it was like a black cloud hanging over his head. He was so angry, and he knew there was a black cloud, but he was not going to be the one to give in because he knew it was his calf. And darn it, he was not going to give that up. Things went on like this for a while. Joe was really miserable, if the truth be told. And one morning, he woke up and he saw between the two farms there was a furrow with a stream running down. He couldn't believe it. He said, "I know what he did. He went up to that top pasture where the pond is, and he used his tractor and he made that furrow and let all the water come down to make a stream between us, and now, I can't even get across there." And Joe fumed and fretted, trying to decide what he could do to get his neighbor back. You know, that old idea of revenge. While he was fuming and fretting, a knock came on his door. He opened it up, and there was a young man standing there, kind of dressed in old clothes with a carpenter's pack on his back. He had deep brown eyes and a soft voice, and he said, "By the way, I've just come to see if you need any help, any jobs I could do here, trying to earn a bit of money, get a bit of food." And Joe invited the young man in, because in those days, you didn't just have people come and work for you. You got to know them first. So Joe sat him down, gave him some breakfast. In fact, Joe was quite happy to have someone to talk to since he wasn't talking to his best friend anymore. And after they ate and Joe decided he really liked this young man, he said, "Well, I do have a job for you. You see that furrow? Look out the window. You see that furrow between our two houses here, our two farms where there's a stream? It wasn't there yesterday. My neighbor did that just to get back at me. I want you to do one better. I want you to build a fence between our two farms, right on my side of the stream, and then I don't even have to look at him. I have all the things you need in the garage, lots of old wood. You can do a great job." And the young man said, "Well, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do." Oh, Joe said, "That's what I want." And he took the young man out to the barn, showed him all the things, and he said, "Okay, now I'm going down to town. I'll be back in a while. You can get to work." And the young man agreed. Off Joe went down to town. I don't know, was he on a horse? Was he in an old buggy? Was he in his car? The story doesn't really say. I sort of imagine him on his horse, actually. He rode down to town, what there was of town, came back several hours later, and he was kind of happy, expecting to see that fence. thinking how good he was going to feel when he saw that fence, and when his neighbor saw the fence. He would have gotten him back proper. And as he rode down his lane and came up toward the house, he pulled up the horse short, because there was not a fence there where he had told the young man to make a fence. There was, in fact, a bridge, a beautiful bridge, no less. A bridge with carved railings, a curved bridge, not just the kind you throw together with a few logs. Joe got off his horse, sputtering. He was about to start yelling at the young man when out from his friend's house came the friend, out the front door, running down to the bridge. "Joe, Joe," his friend held out his hand. "Thank you so much for doing this." And he started crossing the bridge, and Joe ran up to him. In the middle of the bridge they met. His friend said, "Joe, you can have the cow. I don't care. I miss your friendship so much." And he hugged Joe, and Joe, what could he do? He hugged his friend back, and he said, "Yes, all right, I don't care. I miss you too. Our friendship is worth more than that calf." And with their arms around each other, they crossed back over the bridge to Joe's house, sat down on the front porch to have some coffee, and the young man came and sat with them. Joe and his friend couldn't stop talking. A lot had happened since they talked to each other, and the young man sat there smiling. Finally, Joe said to the young man, "Listen, fella, would you stay around for a while? We have a lot more work you could do for us. We could keep you fed. We could keep you in money. It would be great." Well, the young man looked at them both. He put his pack on his back. He stood up and he smiled. He said, "You know, thanks for that offer, but I gotta get going. You see, I have a lot more bridges to build." And that's the end of that story. Which reminds me of this song. It's called "Wonderful World." And I have my guitar here to play it for you. It's an old song from the 50s, and it goes like this. If we could consider each other a neighbor, a friend, or a brother, or a sister, it could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. If each little kid could have fresh milk each day, if each loving family had more time to play, if each homeless soul had a warm place to stay, it could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. Now here's your part. You can sing with me. If we could consider each other a neighbor, a friend, or a brother, or a sister, it could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. If there were no poor and the rich were content, if people were welcomed wherever they went, if each of us knew what true brotherhood meant, it could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. Here's your part. If we could consider each other a neighbor, a friend, or a brother, or a sister, it could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. It will be a wonderful world. Last time, you guys all sing with me. Here we go. If we could consider each other a neighbor, a friend, or a brother, or a sister, it could be a wonderful, wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. It could be a wonderful world. Until next time, let's all make it a wonderful world. Ciao bella. Mwah.